close your eyes. Let everything around you grow still. Tonight we travel to Japan. Not the Japan of cities or light or noise. We are going somewhere much further back, before recorded history, before the first written word, before the first human being opened their eyes on the Japanese islands. We are going to the very beginning. To a time when the world was not yet the world. When there was only a vast formless darkness, a chaos of water that drifted without structure, without purpose, without edges. The ancient Japanese texts, the Kojiki, written in the year 712, one of the oldest books in the world, tell us that out of this nothing, forces came into being. Not gods with faces or voices, something more like principles. The idea of height before anything was tall. The quality of light before light existed. Generation after generation of divine forces arose, each pair more defined than the last, until finally, the seventh generation, two beings emerged who were unmistakably themselves. One was called Izanagi. He who invites. One was called Izanami. She who invites. They were given the unformed world to shape. This is their story. A story of creation, love, loss, descent into darkness, flight back to light. A story that explains why the sun rises each morning, why the moon crosses the night sky, why people are born into the world, why people die. It has been told for over 1300 years. Let it carry you gently into sleep. In the beginning there was the high plane of heaven, a realm of pale, sourceless light. Not the warmth of the sun, which had not yet been born, but something cooler. A light that simply existed, illuminating a vast quiet where the earliest divine forces rested in stillness. Below the high plane of heaven, the world was not yet a world. The old texts describe it as resembling floating oil, a formless surface of something not quite water, not quite sky, drifting in slow patterns across an expanse so large, the word large fails it. It contained, somewhere within its undifferentiated mass, everything the world would eventually become. Every mountain, river, island, living creature. But compressed beyond recognition. The elder gods looked down at this vast floating nothing. They called for Izanagi and Izanami. Of all the generations of divine beings, these two were the youngest, the most clearly defined, the most ready. Where the older kami were vast and impersonal, the kind of force you feel in a turning season, Izanagi and Izanami were something closer to persons. They had presence. They had will. Something like love between them. The elder gods gave them a gift. The Amano Nuboko. The heavenly jeweled spear. Not a weapon of war, but something more fundamental, a spear of ordering, of imposing pattern on the patternless. Its shaft was long, adorned with gems that caught the pale light of heaven. Its tip was designed not to wound, but to stir. Izanagi and Izanami stood together on the floating bridge of heaven. This bridge connected the realm of the gods to the formless ocean below. A threshold. The point where what existed met what had not yet been called into being. They looked down at the dark water. For a long moment they simply stood there. Two divine beings at the edge of everything, looking at nothing, understanding that what they were about to do had never been done before. Izanagi took the jeweled spear. He lowered it into the chaos below. He stirred. Slowly. Deliberately. Feeling the resistance of the formless mass, feeling the patterns begin beneath the surface. Then he lifted the spear. From its tip, brine dripped. It fell back into the ocean. Where each drop fell, something happened that had never happened before. The brine congealed, thickened, became solid. An island rose. It was called Onogoro, the island that curdled by itself. It pushed up from the dark ocean, pale, new, smelling of salt. The first solid thing in a universe that had known nothing but liquid chaos. Izanagi and Izanami descended from the bridge onto the island. They stood on it, felt it solid beneath them. Between them passed something the old texts do not name, a recognition, a settling, the understanding that the work was beginning. They built a palace on Onogoro. At its center they raised a pillar, the heavenly august pillar, rising from the earth of the first island up into the pale sky. The axis of the world they were making. They stood before it. It was time to begin. The ceremony was simple. They would walk in opposite directions around the heavenly august pillar. Izanagi to the left, Izanami to the right. When they met on the far side, they would speak. The speaking would be the marriage. They began to walk. The palace was quiet. The only sound was the sea moving against the shore of the first island, the sea that had not yet been named, that moved as water moves when nothing tells it otherwise. They came around the pillar from opposite sides. Izanami, delighted at the sight of him, spoke first. "What a fine young man," she said. Izanagi responded, "What a fine young woman." But even in that moment, something in him was troubled. He felt with the deep instinct of a divine being that the ceremony had not been performed correctly. That she had spoken first when the order of things dictated he should have spoken first. He said this to Izanami. She listened. They agreed to circle the pillar again. They walked. They came together on the far side. This time Izanagi spoke first. "What a fine young woman," he said. Izanami responded, "What a fine young man." The rightness of it settled over them both. The ceremony was complete. The islands began. Not all at once. They came one by one, each different, each its own expression of the land being called from the sea. Awajishima rose first, long, narrow, reaching into the water. Then Shikoku, four-faced, four-natured. Then Kyushu in the south, warm, volcanic, carrying in its soil the memory of fire. Then Honshu, the great island, the spine of Japan, stretching from cold north to mild south. Then the smaller islands. The scattered ones. The remote ones that sit alone in surrounding water and seem, on certain mornings, to be thinking something private. 14 islands in all. The Japanese archipelago pulled from the sea. Then Izanagi and Izanami turned to the other great work, populating the world with the forces that would animate it. The kami. They made the god of the sea. Vast, ancient, indifferent, generous. The god of the wind. Restless, invisible, touching everything, belonging to nothing. The gods of the trees, who would hold the mountains together with their roots. The gods of the fields, patient agricultural spirits, not dramatic, not spectacular. The gods of ordinary necessary things. The god of the mountains. Slow, enormous, enduring. A presence that does not speak, but simply is. 35 kami in all. The world filling with the invisible presences that would govern it. Then Izanami became pregnant one last time. This child would be unlike any of the others. His name was Kagutsuchi, the fire god. Not the comfortable fire of a hearth. Fire in its essential, uncontrollable nature. The fire that spreads. The fire that consumes. The fire that does not distinguish between what you want to burn and what you need to keep. Kagutsuchi was born blazing. His body was flame, not a body that produced fire, but a body that was fire. As he came into the world, he burned Izanami. She suffered terribly. Even as she suffered, the universe continued creating. Gods of water emerged from her tears, water being the world's response to fire. Gods of earth came from her pain. The universe used even this moment as an opportunity. Izanami died. She became the first death. The first time something that had been present was present no longer. The first time the world contained a space shaped exactly like something that was gone. Izanagi went to her body and circled it from head to feet, from feet to head, weeping. He had never lost anything before. The grief was so complete that his tears became a goddess. A divinity created entirely from crying for someone lost. Even grief creates. When the weeping was done, he stood and looked at Kagutsuchi. The fire god had not meant to kill his mother. He was simply fire, and fire burns. He could not have been born differently. Izanagi drew his sword. He brought it down. Kagutsuchi was divided into 8 pieces, and from each piece new kami were born, gods of rock, thunder, rain. The universe wasting nothing, not even the material of its own tragedies. Izanagi buried Izanami on the slope of Mount Hiba, on the border between Izumo and Hoki. A quiet mountain. A place that felt even then like a threshold between the living world and somewhere else. He stood at her grave. He stood there until standing was no longer enough. Until the fact of her absence had grown so large inside him that it demanded to be done something about. He made a decision. He would go into the darkness and find her. The world was not finished. There was still so much to make. He could not do it alone. He turned from the grave on Mount Heba. He began looking for the way down. The Japanese underworld has many names in the old texts. The land of the dead. The land of roots. The hollow land. Each name describes a different quality of the place, its darkness, its depth, its connection to the earth above through the roots of things. It exists below the living world. Not simply in the direction of down, the way a basement is below a house. More like the way sleep exists below waking, connected to it, necessary to it, made of the same material but organized differently. The passage is called Yomatsu Hirasaka, the flat slope of Yomi. It is a long descent. The light fades slowly. Colors lose their saturation until everything is gray. Then the gray deepens to a darkness that is not quite black but close. Sounds disappear one by one. The wind first, then water, then birds. Until there is only silence and the sound of footsteps. Izanagi walked this descent. He thought of Izanami as he walked. Her voice the first to speak on Onogoro. The way they had circled the pillar. The 14 islands rising one by one. The 35 kami they had made together. How empty all of it felt without her. The slope leveled. The darkness reached its final density, a darkness so complete it had substance. It pressed against him. At the gates of Yomi, Izanami came to meet him. She came to the threshold and spoke from the other side of it. Her voice was unchanged by death. The voice he knew better than any sound in the universe. He told her why he had come. That the world was unfinished. That he needed her, not in the vast cosmic sense, but in the immediate way. The way one specific person needs another. The way absence creates a shape that nothing else fills. Izanami heard him. Then she told him what he needed to understand. She had eaten the food of Yomi. She said it simply, because it was simply true. The food of the underworld had bound her to it. It had made her part of the place where she had eaten it, and that belonging could not be cancelled by wanting to leave. But she had not stopped hoping. She would go and speak to the Lord of Yomi. She would plead her case. She asked him to wait at the threshold. She asked him one more thing. Not to look for her. Not to light a fire or a torch. Not to come inside Yomi no matter how long the waiting took. She was protecting him. She understood something he did not yet, what the darkness of Yomi does to things. What it does to the form of someone who has been in its depths. She was also protecting herself from being seen in a state she had not chosen. Izanagi gave his word. Izanami disappeared into the darkness. Izanagi stood at the threshold and waited. The darkness was absolute. Nothing to see. Nothing to hear, Nothing to measure time by. Only the cold pressing in from all sides, not the cold of a winter night, but the cold of a place where nothing moves. He waited. He told himself she was coming back. He told himself these things the way you tell yourself things when you are in the dark, and what you are waiting for is not arriving. He waited longer. There is a kind of waiting with a shape to it, a defined edge, a sense the thing you want is approaching. There is another kind that spreads in every direction without limit. That feels less like waiting and more like existing in the absence of something. This was the second kind. Izanagi reached up to the comb in his hair. He broke one tooth free. Held it up. Lit it. A small flame in all that darkness. He crossed the threshold. He went into Yomi to find her. The light was very small. A single tooth from a comb, burning in his hand. It pushed back the darkness only a short distance, a wavering circle of amber surrounded by black so deep it absorbed the light almost as fast as the flame produced it. But it was enough. He moved through the tunnels of Yomi, following the sense of her presence. He found her. The old texts describe what Izanagi saw with a restraint that makes it more terrible than elaboration could. Izanami's body was decomposing. Maggots moved across her. 8 thunder gods, the Yakusanoi Kagutsuchi, clung to different parts of her, born from the divine energy of decay. The goddess who had stood beside him on the floating bridge of heaven, whose voice had been the first to speak on Onogoro. The mother of 14 islands, 35 kami, the entire created world. This was what death had done. This was what time does, always, to everything made of matter. Izanagi looked at her. He had loved her. He had crossed the darkness to find her, driven by grief and the refusal to accept she was gone. He had broken his promise. What he found when he broke it was the full truth of what death means. Not the abstract truth, the immediate, specific, material truth. He was terrified. Not just fear of what he was seeing, though that alone would have undone a lesser being. The deeper terror of confronting something love had not prepared him for. The gap between the person you loved and what the world does to every person, without exception, given sufficient time. He turned. He ran. Back through the tunnels of Yomi the way he had come, his small torch throwing wild shadows on the walls, his footsteps the only sound in all that silence. Behind him, Izanami understood what had happened. The broken promise. The light in the darkness. The eyes that had looked at her when she had asked, specifically, deliberately, with all the vulnerability of someone who has very little left to protect, not to be looked at. One thing. She had asked him for one thing. The rage of being seen. The deeper grief beneath the rage, that the love he had crossed the underworld to prove had its limits after all. She called for the shikume, the hags of Yomi, ancient spirits of the underworld, guardians of its borders, enforcers of its rules. Bring him back, Izanami told them. The chase began. Izanagi ran. Through the tunnels of Yomi with the Shikomi behind him, a sound like wind through a narrow place, like something ancient moving very fast through spaces it knew completely. He was a divine being of great power. But Yomi was not his realm. Every advantage he held in the living world was diminished here. The Shikomi, by contrast, were completely at home. As he ran, he reached into his hair and pulled free the vine that had secured it. He threw it behind him. It hit the ground of Yomi and became grapes, great heavy clusters appearing from nothing in the underworld's darkness. The Shikomi stopped. They fell upon the grapes with the hunger of beings who had existed without abundance for longer than they could measure. Izanagi ran on. But behind the Shikomi came the 8 thunder gods. Faster, more purposeful, less easily distracted. Born from Izanami's own body, carrying within them something of her fury. Izanagi reached into his hair again. He threw the comb behind him. Bamboo shoots sprang from the earth, thick, fast, dense, pushing through the dark soil of Yomi with the urgency bamboo has even in the living world. The thunder gods stopped to pull them up. Izanagi ran. The slope of Yomotsu Hirasaka was close. He could feel it, a fractional lightening, the distant suggestion of a world where things still moved. He ran toward it. But Izanami herself was coming now. She had found the strength or the fury to pursue him, moving through the darkness with a force that made the walls of the underworld tremble. At the base of the slope, a peach tree. No one can explain a peach tree at the entrance to the Japanese underworld. The old texts do not try. They simply record it was there, ancient, gnarled, heavy with fruit, its presence in that place stranger than anything else Izanagi had encountered. He grabbed 3 peaches. He turned and threw them. The thunder gods stopped. The Shikomi stopped. Even the force of Izanami in her fury paused. The peach is sacred. In Japanese mythology and the mythologies of many East Asian cultures, the peach carries a power of purification that transcends ordinary understanding. Not a weapon. Something the forces of death find they cannot move through. 3 peaches. The pursuit faltered. Izanagi climbed the slope. He climbed through the returning grey, through the return of sound, wind first, then water, then finally, a bird calling once in pale early light. He came out of Yomi. There, at the top of the slope, was the boulder. Enormous. Waiting. As though it had always been intended for this moment. He put his divine strength to it and rolled it across the entrance to Yomi. It moved with a sound like the closing of an era. Deep, resonant, final. A sound that went down through the rock into Yomi's depths, and up through the soil of the living world, and out across the sea to every island he had made. The boulder settled. Silence. Then Izanami's voice came through the stone. Not screaming. Not raging, though she had every right to both. The cold clarity of someone who has arrived at the far end of grief and found what is waiting there is not despair, but decision. Every day, she said, I will take 1,000 people from your world. 1,000 souls each day. Your world will slowly quiet. Izanagi leaned on the boulder. He answered. Every day, he said, I will bring 1,500 people into the world. For every 1,000 you take, 1,500 will be born. The living world will not quiet. It will grow. Silence. Long. Complete. Then very quietly through the stone, so be it. This is why people die. This is also why, despite death, there are always more people being born than dying. The arithmetic of creation struck as a bargain between two divine beings separated by a boulder on a slope at the edge of the underworld. Izanagi stood at the entrance to Yomi. Then he turned and walked away. He did not look back. He felt contaminated. A divine being who has walked in the realm of the dead carries something of it back, a residue of stillness, a quality of darkness that does not belong in the living world. It must be removed. Izanagi went to the sea, to the island of Kyushu, to a river mouth called Ahakihara, a plain of rushes at the edge of the water, where the river met the sea in a slow widening delta, the water clear, cold, purposeful. He began to remove his clothing. He took off his outer robe. Where it fell, a kami came into being. His belt, another kami. His sandals, his armbands, the ornaments from his hair. Each piece of clothing he removed became a kami as it fell, the universe finding in the act of undressing at the edge of a river another opportunity to populate itself with presence. 14 kami born from the shedding of Yomi's garments. Then Izanagi waded into the river. The water was cold and clear. He felt the contamination of Yomi beginning to lift, drawn away by the current, carried downstream toward the sea. More kami were born from the act of bathing itself, gods of purification, of the process of becoming clean. He washed his arms, his shoulders, his hair, which still carried the darkness of Yomi in its strands. Then he bent forward and washed his left eye. From his left eye, as the water touched it, a presence came into being. Not gradually, all at once. Complete, entire, luminous beyond anything Izanagi had encountered in all his years of making. Amaterasu, the great illuminating goddess, the goddess of the sun. She stood in the world, and the world lit up around her. Not the pale, sourceless light of the high plane of heaven, but something warmer, more immediate. The light of day. The light that makes color possible, that makes shadow possible, that makes it possible to see the faces of the people you love. Izanagi looked at her. Then he bent over the water and washed his right eye. From his right eye came Tsukuyomi, the moon god. Where Amaterasu blazed, Tsukuyomi glowed. Where she was warmth, he was the cooler light that makes the night navigable. the contrast that gives brightness its meaning. The quiet presence that turns darkness from a void into something that can be moved through. Izanagi looked at his two children standing on the bank. Sun and moon. Then he straightened and washed his nose. From his nose came Susanoo. The storm god arrived with an energy immediately different from his siblings. Where Amaterasu was warmth and Tsukuyomi was stillness, Susanoo was movement. Restless, turbulent, full of the enormous kinetic energy of wind and wave, the kind of weather that picks up everything that is not secured and carries it somewhere else. He was the god of the sea, the god of storms. A force neither benevolent nor malevolent, but simply vast. Too large for ordinary categories, too wild for the expectations of a father who had just crossed the underworld and back and might have been hoping for a quiet conclusion. Izanagi looked at all three. Amaterasu blazing on the bank. Tsukuyomi glowing quietly. Susanoo already looking toward the horizon. He called them his three precious children. He told Amaterasu she would rule the high plane of heaven, the sky, the light, the realm of the gods. He told Tsukuyomi he would govern the night. He told Susanoo he would rule the seas. Then he stood on the bank of the river at Ahakihara, clean, the darkness of Yomi gone downstream into the sea, and he was still. He had set out to make Japan. He had made Japan. He had set out to make the kami. He had made the kami. He had set out to find Izanami. He had failed. In failing, he had made the sun, the moon, the storm. The world works in ways that do not always correspond to what we intended. The boulder still sits at the entrance to Yomi. In the Aya district of Matsue, in Shimane Prefecture, that part of Japan that has always felt slightly older than the rest, where mountains come close to the sea and mist sits longer in the mornings, there is a slope the locals have always called Yomotsu Hirosaka. People visit it still. They stand at the top and look down toward where darkness pools at the base even on the brightest days. They feel a quality of the air, a heaviness, the sense of ground being thinner here than elsewhere. Perhaps it is simply topography. A shaded slope in a quiet part of the country. Perhaps it is something else. Inside the darkness on the other side of the boulder, Izanami governs. She became something different after the day Izanagi fled and sealed the entrance behind him. The transformation was gradual. Over time, she became the goddess of death, the queen of the underworld, the force present at every ending. She is not simply cruel. She is not the villain of the story in any clean sense. She is the other half of the world. This is perhaps the deepest truth the story contains. Death is not something imposed on the living world from outside, a punishment or a mistake. It is as fundamental to the structure of the world as life. Without Izanami in the darkness, there is no meaning to Amaterasu in the light. Every birth is eventually a death. Every death creates the space for a birth. The 1,500 born each day. The 1,000 taken. The net surplus of 1,500 that keeps the living world growing. This arithmetic has operated every day since the bargain through the boulder, without interruption. People are born. People die. The world fills itself back up. Izanagi retired to the island of Awajishima, the first island, the one that had risen when the brine first dripped from the heavenly jeweled spear. He went back to where it had all begun, and there, in a small shrine in a quiet grove near the coast, he rested. Perhaps that is right. Perhaps after everything, you find the place where it began and are still in it for a while. Above the world, Amaterasu filled the sky with light. Tsukuyomi rose in the night, and the darkness became navigable. Susanoo went to his seas. The world was complete. Not finished, the world is never finished. But complete in the sense of containing everything it needed to contain. Light, dark, birth, death, calm, storm. The gods above and the goddess below. Between all of these, connecting them in ways that cannot always be seen but can always be felt, the story of two beings who had stood on a bridge between heaven and earth and stirred the chaos into islands. Who had loved each other across the length of the world's creation. Separated by a fire, a death, a broken promise in the dark. Who made their last exchange through a stone. Whose separation in the end is what makes the world make sense. The story of Izanagi and Izanami comes from the Kojiki, the records of ancient matters, written in Japan in the year 712. It has been read for over 1,300 years. It endures because it contains things that are true, regardless of when you tell them. The truth that love is not invincible. That love can cross the darkness and still break under the weight of what it finds there. That the people we love most are also the people we most struggle to face in their full reality. The truth that grief makes promises hard to keep. The truth that death is not the enemy of life, but its counterpart. Without one, the other has no weight, no depth, no meaning. The truth that even in the worst moments the world keeps making things. That creation does not stop for grief or fear or failure. The sun rises every morning because Amaterasu governs the day. The moon moves across the night because Tsukuyomi was born from an eye washed clean in a cold river. The storms come because Susanoo cannot be still. The dead go to Izanami because she is there in the darkness below, keeping her half of a bargain struck through a boulder on a slope at the edge of everything. There is a shrine to Izanagi on the island of Awajishima. People still come to it as they have come for more than 1,000 years. They come to pray for purification. To ask for the washing away of what has accumulated, the grief, the fear, the weight of living in a world that contains in equal measure warmth and cold. They come to do what Izanagi did at the river at Ahakihara. To stand in clean running water and let the darkness go downstream. They come to find their way back to the light. Sleep now. The sun has gone to the other side of the world. Tsukuyomi is keeping watch. The islands of Japan are quiet on the dark water. Somewhere deep below the ground, at the bottom of a long slope, two worlds lie on opposite sides of a stone. Each one the reason the other exists. Rest now. The story is complete.